I'm recording. All right. So we are starting the last couple of topics. So part of what we're doing today is still working on with arrays and radio buttons, but I'm going to also introduce reading a file. And reading the file will not be on the third test. So be able to do it if you want to, but it won't be required on the test. You won't get any extra points, so you won't lose any points if you don't do it. You won't get any extra points if you do it. But I want to start to move us away from this big long string of text in the body of the HTML. And so in that way, I'm starting the new material today. So I took what we did on Friday and sort of redid it using where we fetch a file and read the fetched file rather than paste the text into the document. So I will show you that. And again, so we've got a test coming up. I'm presuming that I'm going to give the test on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. If everybody said I want it before, I would give it before, but lots of people take that day off, and I don't want that day. So people are taking off to be a test day. So the Tuesday before, that's when the natural time for the test would be, but I probably won't give it then. So that'll probably be the Tuesday after. Tuesday, there will be a lab. I'm not giving you the day off, but it will be posted and one can do it on its own, on his or her own. And then I will be an email contact if you run into any problems. So if you did not want to be here Tuesday, if you live far away, then, and this is your only class on Tuesday, which is the case for probably some people, then that's fine. That's why I'm not putting the test on that Tuesday. And so some people would take advantage even if I had the test. If people want to take advantage because I don't have the test that day, that's fine. There will still be work. There's always work. You want to learn as much. All right. All right. So let's show you this new that we did Friday, but with a difference in the way that the data is coming in. So download it and extract it. And then I'm going to copy that over to my 230 folder. It's got all the same images again, so that's a little redundant, but whatever. And code. And matrix quiz reloaded. Okay, so we have in what I just downloaded, again, all those images. And there are two HTMLs. Actually, there are three HTMLs. Matrix quiz F22, that's what we did Friday. And then I have two newer HTMLs that have the word fetch 1 and fetch 2. All right, so, and here was the original text. This is the stuff that we pasted in. And then I have a different data file where each question, all the data for each question is on a single line, which is a nicer file format, but then we have to learn how to read that file format. Okay, so let's look at the first one. And again, it does as far as we got on Friday. So we're just recovering where we were on Friday. So it moves through the questions. That's all we did on Friday. Well, we set up the page and the radio button and so on, but that's where we were. But I've changed populate. So let me scroll down to where there is. It's still a bunch of what we call parallel arrays for the questions, the answers, the choices. There's a counter keeping track of which question we're on. Okay, so here is populate. Get. And sorry, let me close my Explorer so there's more room. Okay, so before we had all that text pasted into the HTML. Now we are going out using a method called fetch to get the data file. The data file is, I'm just using the name of the data file and its extension. So matrixquiz2.txt. That implies if I don't have a folder, that means that they are siblings, we'll call it. So when we have folders and files, we talk about them having a parent-child relationship. The file is a child of the folder. The folder is the parent of the child. So if I have another file in my code, I reference another file, and I have no mention of a folder or anything like that, then that says that they are siblings, that they are in the same folder at the same level. What else? That could be, you can retrieve files from the internet. So that could be a website address. That could be http:// etc. So this fetch will fetch a local file and will fetch and can fetch a file off the internet. So you say fetch, and because you can do this like you were getting something off the internet, that has that's the reason for some of what follows. So we are fetching a resource. We are getting a resource, and then that can take a while, especially if it's out on the internet. And so then we say what to do after you fetch the file. So that is the then. And you can have a sequence of thens. And I have two thens. So my first then is I go and I get the resource and I bring it back. But you don't get just the resource. You've been on the web occasionally, I don't know. Occasionally you've been on the web, right? Okay, so sometimes you go and you try to get a web page, which is a file, and there's something wrong with that file, and you get some error message. So when you are going out to the web and getting something, there is the something that you wanted to get, and then there are statuses and other things to say, here is, it was successful, it wasn't successful, what kind of error if it wasn't successful. And so all that stuff comes back. So you're not just fetching the text file, you are fetching this information about the communication with this text file. There's not much to it here because it's local, but it's the same method we're going to use if it's not local, if it's out in the world somewhere. You know, the internet might be down, that might be, that file doesn't exist, that file, all sorts of things may go wrong. So what we're doing in this first then is just stripping down to what we actually wanted, the file, and pushing it on to the next then. So the reason for the first then is that there is a bunch of stuff more than just the text file, and I want to sort of get rid of that. I don't want to deal with that stuff anymore. So I say return, I have what I got from here was the response, and the response has a text. Later on, we will do something, later on, we will get files which are JSON files, and then this will change. So what you get from the file can change depending on what's in the file. This is just a simple text file, so it's text. But that line 35 can change. Okay. And then we're going to take the text that we got, and now we have what we had before, but before we had pasted it in, now we're back there. And if you remember, we called it text. On Friday, we said, let text equal big, long ass quote of all the question data. So now at this stage, we read this file, we got the response, we stripped off just the text of the response, and now that is the data. And I used the variable we used on Friday, text, and I said, let text equal data. And then we started doing what we did on Friday. There was a first delimiter, which was a vertical bar that separated all the information about one question from all the information about the next question. And then we had an array of questions. So we called it Q stuff or question stuff. And then we looped over that. And we shuffle them. Sorry, that's right. We shuffle them because we wanted our quiz questions in a random order. And this moved around all the stuff as a unit before we break it up any farther. Farther, I don't know. And then we walk through the array again, this time splitting it on a second delimiter of the slash. And we got our various elements of our array. So we got from the Q stuff element, and we split it. We got the pieces array, and the first piece is piece 0 was the question, and piece 1 was the answer, and piece 2 was the set of choices. And then when we got out of all of that looping, we sent to the console our various arrays to see that we had them, and then we called the button method. So the button calls next, and we called, once we had everything set up, we called next. And there is a catch. We talked once about a try catch. This is the catch that belongs to fetch. So there can be a built-in catch that goes with a fetch because it's just understood that things can go wrong with a fetch. The file might not be there. It may be not the kind of file you thought it was. You might have said, fetch this file, and I'm going to treat it like it's a text file, and it was a JPEG. So there are things that can go wrong, so there can be a built-in catch. Okay. Now here's the tricky part about reading a file. Here's the fetch. Here's the first then. Here's the second then. Anything that requires me to have read the file or for the user to do something based on the data showing up has to be in this file. So if I want to do anything based on the data, it should be in here, unless unless I'm responding to a user. Like in the function that handles this second then, I'm creating let's say I create a drop-down list. I'm not creating a drop-down list here, but let's say I create a drop-down list. I can have code that handles the drop-down list someplace else, because the user can't change the drop-down list until there are options to choose. So either I need to do everything that involves the data here, or the stuff that involves the data should be related to a user action, and the user can't perform that action unless the data has been read. I cannot just get the text file. I can't just do line 38 in the then and try to do the other stuff outside of this function, because it tries to race ahead. It tries to do what they call asynchronous. It tries to, instead of going line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, it tries to, because you're going out and getting a resource that might be in the web and it might take a while, it wants to go ahead, jump ahead and do other things. You've got to say, you can't do the other things, or there might be other things that they can do, but all the things that involve the data, you've got to say, you can't do those until you have the data file. Everything that involves the data, the parsing of the data, all that belongs in this then. You could put it in a separate little function and call that function, that would be fine. But you can't try to put stuff that involves the data outside of a method handled by the then, or it will fail. It will try to jump ahead and do it, but the data doesn't exist and it will fail. It's a very, very easy mistake to make. Very, very easy mistake to make. Okay. Are we okay? I'm going to go one step more. I'm going to change it from one big ass long line to a bunch of lines. That'll be just one change. But now I'm going to go to version 2. Let me bring back the Explorer. Let me go to fetch version 2. I'm going to change the data file to this data file that has multiple lines. It's mostly the same. It's the same HTML. Here I am in populate. I'm fetching matrix quiz underscore lines.txt. That's the one I just showed you. The previous version, it was all one line. Now it's multiple lines. Same thing with the two thens. The first then is the response to I got the file. I might be getting the file from the internet, so it has other things other than just the file. It has a status. I'm saying send on the text, forget everything else. I don't care about the status. If I got the text, I don't care about the status. If I got the text, the status was okay. Now in the second then, I have the data. That was the text file. I set it equal to text. But now it has the multiple lines. I read all the text. And now I need to split. I have to change my delimiter. That's really all I'm doing, is changing my delimiter. Before it was a single line and my delimiter was a vertical bar. And now I'm using the fact that the person who wrote the file returned. And I want to use that as the delimiter. This can be strange in that there are two main sort of operating systems in the world. Well, 3 or 4, but there is the Windows world, and then the Mac/Linux world. In this case, they're similar. Mac and Linux are similar here, and they treat the end of a line in a text file differently. They've had 30 years or more, whatever it was, to sort of get together and say, let's agree, and they haven't, and they won't. So we need to hopefully deal with both worlds. And so we are splitting here in line 39. We're splitting the text on not a simple character that we can write. but on an escape sequence that corresponds to a character. And the characters are \R, that is the return character or the return escape sequence, and N is the new line. So we're saying either or both to use as a delimiter. Now, did you run it? So I can still walk through the questions. Somebody downloaded on a Mac. Is it working for you? It's working for you. Okay. It's down. It works for the Mac world. It works, and the Mac world's like the Linux world. So it is, you've got to be careful there that you just can't choose the one, because in one world you have two characters at the end, and in another world you have only one character at the end, and they're not the same character. And so it's a pain in the ass. Okay. All right. So, and then the rest is the same. Shuffle the questions, break the questions up to get our parallel arrays. This is what's coming next. After we learn to deal with a file, the next thing we're going to do is, instead of having a parallel array, we're going to have an object. And so we're going to have Q stuff is going to be an object, and it will have a part of it that is a question, and a part of it that is the answer, and a part of it that is the possible answers. That's what's coming next. We'll get there. And then we will read, and then there'll be, and that's called an object. And then we will read special files that have built into them the object. So instead of us parsing and saying, oh, here's a vertical bar, or here's a slash, or here's a comma, we will just say, there's an object in that file, get it for me. It'll make life easier. The data files are more complicated because they've done all the work to make the data file. So it'll be less work for us as coders, more work for the person making the data file. Okay, so now we're back where we were on Friday. We have fetched the file, we have parsed, and now what do we want to do? Where are we? What do we have? Let me close that Explorer. Again, we have the question, we have some radio buttons. So if the person's going to take this quiz, I guess the next thing we need to do is put the possible answers into the text of the radio buttons. Mm-hmm. Okay. It doesn't matter. Oh no, for what we do, what we're doing right now, from what we do from now on, won't matter. We've read the data. If you want Friday's version where it was pasted in, if you want version 1 where it was where you read in but it was one line, or if we just read in multiple lines. Everything else is the same. That's all I've changed, is how we're getting the data and that the first parse. Okay. So here in next, we were displaying the question, and we would also like to display the possible answers. So the possible answers is in an array called choices. And if we look at the text file, choices, so here it's like who plays the character Morpheus, and here's the answer, Lawrence Fishburne, born, and then here are the possible answers. So the possible answers is a comma separated or comma delimited list. So that's what choices is. So I want to display the choices in the radio buttons. Please help me. There's going to be a loop, but we have to do something before we can loop.
So a variable for the radio buttons.
We could go to the page and get the radio buttons, so then we can either loop over the radio buttons or we can loop over the possible answers. So
that's not the thing you're searching.
I have right now my inspector console. This is what the choices looks like. What do I have to do with the choices? I want to put Neo. I need to split them. I need to take this thing, which is one big long text. I need to split it so it becomes 4 things. Then I can loop, then I can put it in the radio buttons. Okay, so I need choices counter. Choices is the set of choices, but as one big long string. I want it to have the same index as the question so that they're corresponding. And I need to split it. And then when I split it, I need to have a name for that array that I made upon splitting. So I will say let. I need a name. I have choices, which was a set of choices for different questions. And now I have choices counter. That's a particular set of choices for a question. And now I need to split that. And what do we want to call that? I just need a name, doesn't matter. We could call it pieces, we could call it tokens, we could call it individual answer choices. Choices split, all right. I'll do an underscore. That says split. So choices split is going to be choices counter split. So choices, square bracket, counter, that's the particular element of the choices array I want. I want to split it. What is the delimiter? So now I have an array choices split of the answers. So if I were back here, it would be, I would have Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, Agent Smith, individual elements. Okay, I want to put them into my radio buttons. Let's look back at our radio buttons. We labeled our radio buttons with ID 0, 1, 2, 3. So we could get through the radio buttons based on that. Or we can go to the page and get a set of radio buttons. We could do document. There's a version get elements by tag name. So I could get all of the radio buttons and have them as an array. Or we've named the IDs systematically starting at 0. So we could construct an ID and use get element by ID. So again, we need to get to individual radio buttons. Two approaches here. We can get an array of radio buttons and walk through the array of radio buttons. Or we can construct, since the way we've given these radio buttons IDs, we can sort of walk through it and say red answer plus I and use get element by ID. That sounds like more familiar.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want me to do that? Yeah. I guess. So what are we going to say here? What are we going to say? We're going to, we're looping. I like I like I as a counter. I'm going to go up to the length, but not including the length of choices split. Dot length. I could say go up to, not, I could say I go up to 4, I less than 4, that sounds easy, but somebody rewrites the quiz and has 5 choices or has 3 choices. This makes it more generic that I would have to change less if they change the data. I plus plus and curly curly, and what are we doing? We're saying I want to create an ID. Do I want to create a variable for the ID and then use it, or do I just want to like in place get element by ID and then sort of slap it together as I'm going? No response. I can get the ID. I can break it down and get the ID of, what did we call it? Rad and 0. So I can say rad ands plus I. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a semicolon. That is the ID sort of isolated, and then I can use it. Document, what am I saying? Document. Get element by ID. Use that ID. And then what do I want? I want this isn't where I really want to put the word is the radio button. So, So where I really want to put the answer is here in the label. I'm grabbing the radio button. That's good for the value. So we could do that. And that would be choices split I. That gets the values of the radio buttons right, but we put it in a label. We can play the same game here and give the labels IDs. We haven't given the labels IDs, but we can. So we can give the labels IDs and play the same game, but with labels and use their inner HTML. That's probably the simplest thing. Or we can try to play very fancy games with the CSS kind of a thing and try to grab the label that's next to the radio button. And let's not do that. That's too hard. So let's run up to the HTML. And give these IDs. And I'll call it what? LBL ANS 1 or ANS 0. So I'm giving the labels IDs. So that will be 1. Be 2, and this would be 3. we came along to the label and gave the label an ID, and I called it LBL and 0, LBL ends 1, 2, and 3. Now I can come down here. Let's do this. ID 2 is label ands document get element by ID, ID 2. It's not a value, it's inner HTML, but it's also choices split. I'm going to use choices split as the value of the radio button, and I'm going to use it as the inner HTML of the label. I want if I grab the selected radio button to know what their answer was, and I also want them to see their answer before they make it. So what does Neo knock over in the Oracle's kitchen? Yours will be different because we shuffled. The Oracle, a vase, a glass, a plate. So we're displaying the answers. We're not doing anything with the answers, but we're displaying the answers. So we're getting closer to a person being able to take this quiz. Now, what could we do with these answers before we display them? We can check if the answers are correct. We could, when the person clicks next, we can grade what they have and then display the new equation. Or not the new equation, the new question. There is a Q in there somewhere. So that's one possibility. What can I do with these answers before I put them in the radio buttons or the radio button labels? We can if you want to make sure that none of the radio buttons are checked, we could do that. That's a sensible idea. So I like that idea. Document get element by ID, that's the radio button. ID 2 is the label, ID is the radio button, and it's the checked property. And we want that to be false. So I'm looping through, I don't know which radio button they chose, but I'm going to loop through them all and make their checked property false. Then they should be none of them checked. So let's check that. That was a good idea. I like that. So here we go, save. So I'm going to choose one, right shoulder, and then say next. And then when I get to the next question, none of the answers are pre-selected because of what we just did. So that was a good suggestion. Now, if here's the one question, who throws away the mobile phone? And cipher is the first choice, okay. I'm going to refresh the page and start again, and I'm going to look for that same question. Of course, it's near the end because that's my luck. And cipher is the first choice again. The questions are in a different order, but the answers are in the same order because we didn't shuffle the answers. We shuffled the questions, but we didn't shuffle the answers. So we could add a shuffle. So of course, a shuffle is a shuffle. So we're going to steal our previous shuffle and then adapt it. So here's the shuffle. 43 to 49 for me. And what did we do here? We split the choices and then we started displaying them let's shuffle them first. Let me format, get some things lined up. Okay, so now I'm looping over choices split. So that's what I'm looping over. Missed the C in my copy. There's choices split is my array. That goes here. Here. And here. Here. And here. Let me save that. So now the answers should be also now in a random order when they're displayed on the page. So here is who plays the character Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne. Keep saying burn. And let me refresh the page and look for that question again. So now I've refreshed the page. I'm looking for who plays Morpheus. And now it's Wesley Snipes as the first choice. So we've mixed up the questions. We've mixed up the answers. So my students can't cheat off of one another. Well, they probably still can, but make it harder to cheat. All right. So now we're presenting the questions, the answers. Now we need to try to start grading. And here was a question that we asked on Friday. I will repeat the question and then we'll do what you say. So right now, the way we have it with one button, we have one button, then we are grading and moving to the next question on the same function. So we made our life hard by we're supposed to grade and we are supposed to move to the next question in the same function. So one way to make your life easier is to say, oh, here's a button for grading and here's a button for moving to the next question. And to make sure that they don't do anything stupid, you disable, when they're moving to the next question, you disable grade, and when they're grading, you disable next, and you make them toggle back and forth. So you can toggle back and forth in your code with some if, am I grading or am I moving to the next question? But, or you can have two buttons and sort of separate that function. You want to stick with your one button, you want to do with, you want to do it with one. He's saying in the back two, nobody else is saying two, people say two. So let's introduce another button, make our lives a little easier. So where's that first button? That's up here. And so that's going to be button grade. We'll call it grade. Grade. I need a grade function. I'm going to quick make a grade function. Okay. And the first thing I want to do when they click next is disable next and enable grade and vice versa. So in next, I'm going to add document get element by ID, but next, I hope that's what I called it, dot disabled, that's the property, right? And make that true, I could only spell true, and make the grade false, and then do the opposite in grade. All right, let's see what happens. I had, what did I spell wrong? What did I, what he's telling me? BNT, BTN, okay. Thank you. All right, thanks, good catch. And let's see. So there is, I have the first question. I was wondering in my head, do I have to do anything in design? Do I have to disable one of the buttons? But when the page was starting, I called next, and next took care of it for me. So here, now I'm ready to grade, and then I can go to the next question, and grade and go to the next question. So you've separated the grading functionality from the moving functionality, and we have the moving functionality mostly done. We have one thing to worry about. What about when we're out of questions? We haven't dealt with that. Do you want to deal, we have 2 minutes. Do you want to deal with dealing with the number of questions ending gracefully, or grading, or I don't know if we can do anything. If you guys don't answer, it'll take start grading, or the number of questions. Okay, so in next, I'm going to say if the counter is, I guess, equal to the length of the array of questions, 14, then we'll say no more questions, the quiz is over, thank you, blah, blah, blah. Something, I don't know. Or we could do that down here once we make the counter. And we could say that if the counter is 14, then we could say the end or something like that, or we can make the button disappear, or who the hell knows what, we can do stuff. But if the counter is equal to the, I need any of the questions was one of the arrays, right? Questions. Questions dot length. I can't spell. Let's just alert for now. We should do more than that, but I'm out of time. It's over. Okay. You have to work a little harder there, but let's see if we can figure out when the game is over. So grade next, 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 grade next. It's over. And then, of course, I didn't stop it. I know when to stop it, but I didn't stop it. So we have to figure out what to do, but at least we sort of begin to know when to do it. And we don't want to stop the last question from being graded, so we got to be careful. But All right, but I'm out of time, so I will stop recording and as normal, hang out. If you're a freshman and you need to register, you can talk to me about that or help with code.